Just sound.
There we go. Hey, Gary, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Kurt. Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, for a second there, I couldn't hear a word.
How we doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I'm not sure how good our internet connection is. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Yeah. Okay. It's been a bit patchy today. We've had some pretty crappy weather. I think maybe one of the towers might have blown over last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I don't know. It was really, really strong winds. We had to pull all of our warnings and everything down. But the internet this morning just seemed a little bit slower than normal.
All right. They'll usually say something if they're.
Yeah. What I need to try and figure out is how to increase the size of my screen. I've only just got the broadcast screen. Do you hit another button?
So, I don't know. I invite you as a. I can. Oh, excuse me. I can invite you as a participant or as the broadcaster. So I'm going to assume since I have you.
It's okay. It's okay. I can sort of see it. It's just that it's really small on the screen. So
for you, yeah. I mean, you're half and half for me.
Okay, that's fine. I don't need to see it, but with my glasses on, I can actually see the comments today.
I'm trying to get the camera working on my iPad so I can. There's so.
Actually, hopefully next week or the week after, I'm ordering a USB video cable so that I can use the Sony cam as well, and that'll give me a bit better quality.
Oh yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. So you were up early this morning modeling, just as I was going to bed.
Yeah, I was working on. It's funny. I picked this up off my shelf, and it's literally like done. Like
it's a calling tower.
Yeah, it's a cinder conveyor and ash pit for my engine yard. But after working on the Craftsman kit, which is 50, 60, 100 hours, this thing went together in like 45 minutes, and it's like, I almost feel like I cheated the hobby.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things we're going to talk about today, is the difference, I suppose, between plastic modeling and Craftsman kits. We talked about Craftsman kits a bit last week, but plastic modeling or model kits is just a different skill, but it brings you into the hobby, I suppose, because it makes everything just a little bit easier.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that as we get into this, it's funny. We were talking earlier. I think we said something this morning. I don't think people understand it's twice as much work to make something look old than it is to make something look new. And
I've been spending probably about 6 or 8 hours making that scratch build. I've got it here. Actually, I'm still working on it. That I was doing this week, just to make it. I've got to try and adjust this to get it into the. There it is. Yeah, to get that, to look old, especially if you look at the back where the painted signs are, to try and make them part of the build rather than just a piece of paper sticking on the back. Right. That's a fair bit of effort. But I've got to thank you. You know, when we talked about transferring signs,
Right.
I think you're using tripod. And I said I picked up gesso. If you see, see if that'll focus on. Can you see that sign, the To Let sign?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really fine. I used gesso and transferred it onto the wood. And what I wanted, and it's worked out perfect. You can actually see the wood grain through because that in the real world that would have been painted as a sign, so you'd still see the timberwork. So I didn't want just to stick the paper there. I used your method, and it worked fantastic.
Oh, good. Yeah, there's nothing. It's amazing how much when you do that on brick. A lot of the brick kits from the DPM stuff and the Walters stuff. If you can't, or if you choose not to do that stuff, it's almost next to impossible to get any realism out of the kit because it's so hard to kill that plastic look. And I think that's going to be, well, it goes back to, I mean, in a sense, Charles George is the one that inspired me. You look at his layout and, some of those massive buildings that he overbuilt that are, I think a lot of them he's tearing down, that, those big, huge structures that are on his railroad. He's got massive signs on them.
Yeah.
And they look, and I mean, he talks about how he goes to antique stores and looks for magazines, and how he'll buy magazines just for the pictures. Now you've got people on eBay selling, pages and pages and pages of 30s and 40s and 50s wall advertising for that specific purpose.
Yeah, I find I just, in fact, here's the my scraps that I just put on the Boats to Let sign. I took from I recreated it, but it was a photo of the Hoboken swimming baths in obviously New York, and they had a boat house beside it where you could buy boats, and that the sign was exactly the same. I thought, oh, that'll look pretty cool on this building, so I just recreated it. But yeah, just a quick Google search or DuckDuckGo, and you can find hundreds and hundreds of different advertising. In fact, where is it? It's so small.
There's a couple resources on the internet. I literally have probably a little over 120 pages of signs. Somebody in one of the model railroad forums, somebody went and created a Pinterest account and literally made almost 200 pages of signs of every single size you can imagine, all from the 20s on. And I basically, that's what I like. If you look at these, you can see these are done on the tracing paper.
Yeah.
And they're done you can see them right. They're done in reverse. So this is, what I was telling, this is the method that I found this tracing paper too that I think is the greatest. I mean, these are anywhere from small street side signs to massive structure side signs. And it's all soda or cigarettes or whatever. But there's a ton of, it's very cool how nostalgic you can kind of get because of the Cracker Jack ads and all the old ads and whatnot. But anyway, I have literally 200 pages of this. And the only reason I don't have it is I haven't printed them out. And whenever I'm putting a building together, I'll go measure off, 3 or 4 locations on the building. Well, you know what? I can show you real quick. Go ahead and talk, Gary.
Okay. Another really good resource is Shorpy, I think it is. It's a photographic site, and it's predominantly the US, although there is some European photos in there, but it's basically from the Depression era through to the 50s. It's just unbelievably good photographs of and to see what it's really like.
So this is my railroad is set in the early Second World War, so I'm always looking for, there's tons and tons of stuff done. But you can see there's, I have the just like a poster board, and then I have these are I tried to make look painted on using the matte medium method. But you can see the variation in sizes, and then if you go to the back of the building, you can see all across here. And the Pez is a really cool one, but these come from the other. But anyway, so that's what I'll do. I mean, I'll look at this. I'll finish it. This is, by the way, this is one of the Walther's street front storefront things.
Yep.
And you can tell. I always look, and I think I said this to you. The roof of an HO building is like the face of a model figure. If you look at the roof and the details, that's. If you go back and look at buildings in that era, and from that era, every one of them looks like almost like a junkyard on the roof. And so
that's where George absolutely sort of nailed it. 30 years ago, where he understood that. It's funny. And it's not a criticism of other model railroaders, but it's what people choose to do. The guys who model with Lionel and those sort of things, they tend to they're quite happy with it, and I can understand that they're happy with a toy-like structure. But sort of, to me, or my enjoyment is the fact that you're trying to create something that looks as true to life as you possibly can. Well, and that's where dirt weathering comes in.
Well, it's one of the things too. If you think about modeling from an artistic sense, no matter what scale railroad you use, the modeler or your viewer is 9 times out of 10 is going to be looking down onto your diorama, which is basically what the model railroad is. The first thing they're going to see is the tops of your buildings. And if those aren't done, and, just like in the diorama, you're looking at the figures, you'll look at the vehicles, you'll look at, there's a very scientific method to how the eye is trained to work on art. And model railroading is no different. And, this kind of gets into, we talked about last week, we talked about tools and everything. The level of investment in a model. I mean, this is a Walther's kit that could have taken me an hour, 2 hours maybe to work with. But every one of the buildings has a different texture. Every one of the buildings has window shades with curtains. Every one of the buildings I haven't labeled any of them yet as stores or whatnot, but this is a street front, storefront, Main Street kind of a thing. And so my plan is that this will go closer to the front of my railroad. So, I would argue that for a model railroader, the time invested on a model is directly proportional to the real estate that model will occupy on your railroad. And
I think nothing highlights that more than a tree. A tree that you want to put in the foreground of your model railroad, you'll probably spend an hour creating that tree. Whereas a tree that's at the background, 5 minutes and you can make something look realistic. It's interesting that you said, looking at model railroading as artistic. It was only something I was considering the other day. When we went sailing on the weekend, one of the people we sailed with is a very good friend here now in Korea, and he's one of Korea's, if not the world's best dental. He's a dentist, surgeon, but he does reconstructive surgery and all that sort of stuff. And the skills he has and some of the equipment we were talking about.
Yep.
He has a scanner that will scan to 30 microns. And I went, oh, well, that'd be pretty cool to play with. He said, oh, if you want, you can. But he said to me, he said, oh, what do you do with your toys when you're finished? And I said, well, they're not really toys. You know,
right.
they're them toys. And because he was down here on the boat, and I said to him, and this is my thought as well, you know, would you consider a painter who paints a painting realistically and does a magnificent job, would you consider him or that painting a toy?
Right.
And it's not. He's created a piece of art. No, I think sometimes, you know, what we do at our level of modeling, you're creating three-dimensional art. You're trying to recreate something as close to possible, that especially with the steam era being back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. You're doing historical art.
Well, that you mentioned that. So here is a collection, and I look at this every bit like an artist would look at a collection of paintings. You know, here is a collection of kits that I built, all individuals. And I look at each one of these pieces, and you know, you've got this is a design preservations wall kit, you know, that's got and it's done over. It's a local flower lady that I know. I made a store for her or whatever. But if you look at the walls again, the walls on the building are done. You know, this is a 5-minute kit. This took me probably 2.5, 3 hours minimum without painting to do the signs on the side of the building. You know, there's mail pouch tobacco and whatnot. And then you have, and that's a plastic kit. And then right next to it, you have this Craftsman's kit, which was the kit of the month from Foss, a taxidermy that I looked long and hard for an HO scale male buck, because and I actually worked with Joy, who's one of the viewers here. It goes back to, again, I didn't need any of that to complete the building. No. But when I walk around, if you and this is the same, I don't care if you're a diorama builder or a model train person. One of the magical pieces of the hobby, and I'll go back to George Cilios. I probably have I've met George. George lives 45 minutes from me, and I've been there a couple times. I've gone over he's a huge Red Sox fan, so I use that. You know, I for lack of a better term, I hoard myself out all I could to take advantage of that one with George. And I've gotten in to see the Franklin South Manchester, and he let me walk around. I probably have 1,500 or 1,600 photos of the layout. And the magic in the hobby is that I can look at some of my really detailed photos. I can look at them 3 times and see something new each time I look at it, which is what his railroad is. You can go around his railroad is massive, and you can walk around. And he basically. So if you think about his railroad, let's just say I don't know how big it is. Let's just say it's 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
If you look at it, his railroad is 1,500 1-foot by 1-foot dioramas, because that's how detailed. You've got something that's 1,500 square feet, and he's literally got it detailed to the inch, and that starts and ends with his buildings. I mean, it's just so many little things, and that is where, you know, it's funny how we always hear. I always have people on here, Garry, who are telling me, you know, oh my God, I'd kill myself. I'd shoot myself. I don't have the patience for that. You know, I can't, there's no way. And I always tell the same thing. No, if it was something you were passionate and had a love for, you absolutely would have the patience. Because when you open a box of George's kit and it's nothing but blank strip wood, and then you know in your mind's eye, you're already seeing, you know, this structure at the end of it. You do what you have to do. I'm sorry to interrupt, but before you start talking, Garry is another one when you see some of Gary's kits, and Gary has links online, and you need to check them out. And I said last week, you're talking about a master craftsman. I'm proud of some of the work I've done. Some is better than the other. That I certainly have a long way to go. But when you look at Gary's structures, you have to understand that almost every inch of that kit is built from something other than what it was intended for. A lot of this stuff comes in a box, and the parts are there for me. The magic in scratch building is he showed you the building earlier. Some of his, I'm going to be proud to put it on my model railroad. Some of the detail that Gary gets into, and I actually wanted you to, if you could talk about, Gary, talk about conceptual. You scratch build. So here's the difference, guys. I buy a kit, for the most part, I get one of these. I get an instruction book, and I get a box full of parts. Okay, and listen, it's not easy. Some of these, I don't care how good. Some of George's kits are 10 full, 5 foot by 5 foot page instructions. Gary starts his models a step before this, which is conceptualizing. You know what? He sees a building in a magazine. Gary, I want you to talk about that from kind of like your inspiration for an idea. Just kind of walk through how you arrive at actually putting the first two boards together, because there's a lot of steps between your concept and your first build, the first thing you build. And I don't think a lot of people understand. I think that's an attraction to some people, and I think it terrifies other people.
Yeah, I fully agree with you when you say that some people say that, I wouldn't have the patience. It's really not a patience thing, because the great part about it is you can just put it down and come back to it a year later or 2 years later. Like sitting in the background, I don't know if it's actually in the shot. I talked about it last week. I have a lighthouse and a lighthouse keeper's building that I just can't come back to. It's just not right for me. But like this one was like a week ago that I started, and the main reason for it was the building I found like a blueprint of, and it was what I wanted to build. We've called it Hudson's Boathouse. Hudson is our new grandson, so it was named after him, and it's just an interesting structure in that it's the atypical American 30s building. It has the typical. So I'll try and get that a little bit closer.
Hey, listen, Gary, if you hold that, is that your computer that you're doing it in front of?
Yeah, I am. So okay. It's all back to.
No, that's fine. If I eliminate my picture, you become full screen, which is much easier to see some stuff. So I'll do that for a minute.
So at present, the structure hasn't got doors or windows. It's got the cutouts for it. In the big opening in the front, I'm putting a set of 3 bifold rusty doors, and then on the side there are. What I can do is I've taken a couple of photos. I'll post a link in a second in the comments of what it is and how it's going. But a lot of it, the roof I was interested in just on this one, trying to put a rusty, instead of a corrugated roof or just a panel roof. It's more a pressed steel roof.
Right.
The sign that's on the side, as I said, was inspired by the Hoboken swimming bars, which I think is what I'm going to probably build next, because all of this stuff is, obviously we're sitting on a yacht, so we have my influences, apart from ex-Navy and sailing around the world on this boat. I like the waterfront. The railway thing really is a passion that was passed down from my father. He was a model railroader and a model engineer more than a model railroader. His passion was live steam, and with a little bit of this sort of stuff. But I took it from there. But yeah, this structure will sit beside the Hoboken. Well, I'll build a version of the Hoboken swimming bars that will go on this waterfront diorama that that we're probably going to somehow design up for you. It keeps getting bigger and bigger every time I look at it. Like, oh, how can we put that together? Did I send you a copy of the design I've drawn up of the track?
No, I haven't got it yet.
Okay, I'll send you an email with a couple of thoughts. I found there's Waterfront. This is just talking railroads. Waterfront is really interesting because the radius has suddenly become really tight because there's no engine running down the track at 60 mile an hour. Everything is just slowly walked through. So you look at the waterfronts of Baltimore and New York and those sort of places. The tracks really wind and twist around streets and then curve sharply out onto wharves. And it's just an interesting area. And I had a look at I've got to think of where it is now. It's on the Chesapeake anyway. But I got some prototypical track plans, as in the real track plans, not model track plans, of an area. For the life of me, I can't think of the name of it, but it's the sort of area that we're trying to encapsulate. And the fact that you're modelling eastern seaboard railroads, it sort of all works and ties in. But what's really interesting is the lead-in road, and this is a bit model railroading for those who are listening that may not interest you, but the thing is that the track leading into the seaport area is coming in at 90 degrees to all the other tracks. So it has to cross over all those tracks before it can switch back into the wharf area, which just for an operating, which is another side of the hobby, for an operating thing and visually, it's really quite nice because everything is so tight. It's twisting around the streets and it'll work well. But yeah, in research, I don't know how I got onto that. Researching all of that, I came up with the bars that are at Hoboken, or the swimming. It was a floating structure that hung off one of the wharfs that has actually got railroad running down it, and it was where this would have been back in the 20s and 30s. They actually swam and they taught swimming, and this type of structure, the one that I've built here, which is it's a boats and I've actually called it Hudson's Boathouse. So car and boat repairs. So it sort of doubles up for both. So that can sort of lead to a street, but it would have backed on to what are the baths at Hoboken, and this, I think it was a fairly normal structure on the east coast of America where people would swim. I'm assuming they must have had some sort of a net underneath it, but it's a square structure. So I'll build that thing up next.
I wanted to two things. Someone earlier asked, Tim asked where you buy kits like this. I just put a post with some links that I had last week. You can find them anywhere and everywhere online. The death of the hobby shop, while tragic, has spawned a surplus of online hobby shops, which allows you to do some price saving shopping. Number one. And number two, Bannerman says, good grief, you almost need to be a structural engineer. That goes back to what we were talking about last week. This hobby is at a level that you decide as the hobbyist. Yeah. Here's a great example, all right? World War II is probably one of my passions in life, armor as well. But right here, you've got a Walters plastic sand pit ash conveyor that took me literally less than an hour to build. It's not painted yet, but I did that this afternoon just kind of as a one-off. And then I've been working on, a lot of my Periscope viewers know this, a 1940 diorama of the first or the 3rd Panzer Division's Recon Battalion in France. And it's a massive diorama. I don't do anything in 4 by 6 inches for some reason. But I've got two. This is a German 223 armored car And you can see this has a full interior. This is a command car. It's got a full radio setup inside. It's got wires running from everything to the antennas. And every inch of this color is historically correct. This is what you call German gray. They use the color called in German, it's called cream weiss for their interiors. And this is a French Char B1, which was their main battle tank that's actually knocked out. You can see it's got no treads on this side. But this took me probably, I don't know, an extended period of time to build the interior. This probably took me the same amount of time with no interior because of the paint job. It's got a French early war camouflage on it, and so you've got 45 minutes here to 12 to 15 hours here, and everything in between. And that is that's why where you buy your models kind of ties into the same how much detail is in it. You can go to eBay and find a craftsman's kit. It's funny, Gary. I've been looking for a Liberty ship at HO scale.
Yeah.
And I found a company that builds them, and they built some museum quality stuff. Just to give you people an idea of how big this hobby can be. It's about 5 feet long when it's done, because it's a full ship done at the waterline. And the company wants to charge $6,000 for the build.
Wow.
And they're literally backed up with customers. For all they build model railroad HON scale shipping and structure, and mostly shipping, but they do fully deep. Like they do 187. Imagine, so this is 135th scale. 187 scale would be about like this down here, but you can imagine a full size Liberty ship and an LST as well. That at 187 scale, again, it's 5 feet long, and
I think that's why model railroading is as popular as it is because you can physically, nothing is too big unless you want to, if you want to model New York Central railway station, that's going to be big. But a locomotive, like especially in the steam era, apart from the bigger Challengers and big boys and that sort of stuff, a locomotive is about 7 or 8 inches long. So it's manageable. Whereas I look at, like, for me, like with obviously all of this stuff is Waterfront. I've got the model that I've built of a ship under construction, but the ship is actually a 70-foot schooner. So 70 foot at 3.5 millimeters to foot works out at whatever 3.5 times 70 millimeters is. But yeah, it's about that long. So that's manageable. I've got I'll just get Wendy to pass me over. I've got this is a Korean company which does great work. Academy.
Yep, I love Academy stuff.
This is an Oliver Hazard Perry FFG. So my intention was, it's a bit hard to scratch build whilst we're underway. So on our way to Alaska, I'm going to spend night after like 20 nights sitting in the cockpit by myself while Wendy's asleep downstairs. And one of the ways to stay awake is modeling. So my intention was this plus a couple of other kits I'll probably put together. But as you said, like this is one, let me have a look. I wasn't even say. Oh, 1/350th scale, whereas we're talking about 1/87th scale. So, like an FFG, I've got a really good, a friend of mine is just an exceptional modeler, and a lot of his work is done on commission in Australia and predominantly war stuff. And he's also an exceptional painter, as in artistic painter. But everything he does is war related. He was in the Navy with us. He's quite a character, actually. But yeah, he builds like 1/30th and 1/40th scale ships and the things are huge, but the detail, and when he does it, he scratch builds everything, and he goes to the level of detail. And this is the great thing about the hobby. You can choose what level you want to do, but Randall goes to the detail of actually buckling the plates between frames on ships.
Yeah.
You know, which is typical. You know, even a brand new ship going in the water is going to have some buckling as it's been welded up. So he goes, but most of the stuff he's doing is Second World War. So you know that they were even probably worse put together than a modern warship.
Yeah.
But yeah, the level of detail he goes.
Well,
to
it's just like for model railroading. You know, that's one of the things that there are some model railroaders whose passion and hobby is in track laying. And when I say track laying, I'm talking about individual ties, individual tie plates with spikes. There's full, you can buy from Micromark, you can buy a track laying kit that will give you all of the small details you need. I was just going to show you. This is 1/87th scale right here. This is HO scale. And this is a brass locomotive that has yet to be done, standard gauge. But this is a model. These things you can find from eBay to Amazon to almost every model railroading company will sell them. They'll run from $200 to $500 or $600, and no self-respecting model railroad would ever put a brass engine on their layout without it being painted. And that is its own business. This model right here will cost me anywhere from $200 to $400 to have it painted. Because of, and the more detailed the paint job, it has to be stripped and sandblasted and all those things. But there's literally nothing as pretty as a weathered brass engine done right.
Yeah.
And
you wouldn't consider painting it yourself?
I have, but I won't. You know what? I'm taking a page out of John Allen and George Silios's book, and understanding that I can't do everything. If I'm going to build this layout, if I'm ever going to finish this layout and have it running, I can't build all the buildings, lay all the track, hand lay all the track, and hand paint all the. There are certain things that, and I want my railroad to be at a. I want my railroad to be at a Cilios level quality of detail.
Yeah,
I can't do everything if I want that. So I've got to give away some control.
That's the good thing about again the hobby. You know, you can do it in a modular form so that you can complete like 6 foot at a time,
right.
And then get other people to help. And as I said, like in fact, your waterfront will be done by the time we event. Well, depending on how long this scam of a virus keeps going for. I may have built 3 waterfronts by the time I get to the US. But yeah, no, the hobby. I think it was the thing that attracted me to the hobby, apart from the fact that it was my father's influence. But I've always liked it. Even like when we're up in the Persian Gulf and sailing around the Indian Ocean, doing all that sort of stuff on warships, we spent hours of just monotony at defense stations, where half the ship is asleep, half the ship is awake, and you're sitting literally on a weapon system waiting to shoot it, but realistically knowing it's going to take hours for something to escalate, except obviously up in the Persian Gulf, that was a little bit different. But sailing around in Indian Ocean, doing an Indian Ocean deployment, you're manning the weapon systems, but you're not expecting to fire at a second's notice. So quite often I would sit there, this is when I was younger, and I didn't have an in charge type role. I would sit in the gun, what we call the gun control room, and just model away at a heart's content just to pass the hours. And it was modeling is a hobby that I think it sort of fell out of fashion a little bit with kids because of the internet, because of computer gaming, but what we're finding is that it's now making a big comeback because the war gamers and the even the guys that are playing computer games, they're finding now that they want to go to the next level, and the next level is three-dimensional, rather than just being on a flat screen. So, I've mentioned it. Our son-in-law was very big into computer gaming, and he's running his small on-the-side company making dice for Dungeons and Dragons, that sort of stuff.
Right.
But he's slowly become involved in the hobby, and he now has our grandson, our daughter, and him. So, and hopefully we'll pass it on, because I think what I get out of the hobby is just I won't say it's escapism, but there's so many sides to modelling, whether it's model railroads or aircraft or military. There's the research, and you can go to whatever level you want. As I said, the fact that there's guys who enjoy, and I can understand what the enjoyment of it, of just collecting Lionel 3-rail, very toy-like looking trains.
Yeah.
But that's just another side of the hobby. I think where you and
I'm always. It's funny because, like the rest of life, hobby has its own little niche, and there is obvious and apparent elitism in the hobby. From model railroading to model building, there are worldwide content. Modeling is a worldwide thing, and it's incredibly big in the Far East. Some of the probably I would tell you that if I had to rank, the 10 best model building talents in the world, most of them would be Japanese modelers, a couple Korean, a couple Asian, because the things that they do are at a level. I can't even begin to explain it, but people build for competitions, people build for display. And Garry and I have said this time and time again, and I think it's something we'll continue to push. This hobby is exactly what you choose it to be. But I think that there is an end result to this hobby that is very common. And that is, to me, the satisfaction of sitting back and looking at something. When I see those vehicles I just showed you, I see hundreds of hours in reference books and searching images. And, I spent probably 3, 4, 5 hours to make sure that the diorama I'm building contains the exact vehicles that representative of 1941 German Recon Battalion, which means I've got literally, I think 18 motorcycles, in the diorama, most of them with sidecars, trucks and Jeeps, whatever. But I like the thought of taking a picture in a book that's from 1941 and building a real live version of it. And that's very similar to model railroading in many ways.
Well, I think that is the whole part of the whole. Again, it's not a right or a wrong thing. What you choose to do, it's a personal thing, and it's just it's I suppose escapism, for want of a better term. It's so easy to spend hours just building or working or researching a part of the hobby.
Right.
It's enjoyable. And I hope and I think that three-dimensional hobbying, for want of a better term, is on a big comeback. It was overtaken by computers, where a lot of it was just like the guys who were playing. I shouldn't say playing, but they were wargaming. A number of those people migrated to the two dimensions of a computer screen, to computer gaming. But a lot of those people seem to be now wanting more, and they're coming back to the hobby. And I see with model railroading, I think it had a bit of a death in the, I won't say death, but it certainly slowed down a lot in the mid-2000s, sort of 2010 on. There wasn't a lot happening. A lot of the magazines, their readerships fell, but they're all now on a comeback because it's people people have got more time, and you want the problem with a computer game, as I said, I've never really been a gamer. There's not a lot of self-satisfaction in just going on and playing a game unless you're actually designing the game. Whereas when you start three-dimensional modeling, there is some sort of self-satisfaction in being able to create something that was real.
Well, there's a part of this hobby I noticed that keeps it attractive in the sense that almost nobody can look at a 3D model of any size and not be fascinated. It's kind of a miniature life in a sense. And when you can build models that photograph as real life, and there are a lot of people that do, which is kind of the level of quality I think we both shoot for. It draws you in. It's the same as a painting. A beautiful painting will draw you in to look over the canvas and find things. A model's no different, and so, I think we were trying to come up with a topic this week, and I think we found it in the sense that I think one of the things that Gary and I both hope to do is to have one or two or more of you. I've seen a couple people say, I did this when I was a kid and I'd love to get back into it. And it's one of those things that's far easier than you think it is. Like most things in life, you don't have to leave your chair at home to go shopping and find all of the extra things and find all of the things you need. You can literally make an eBay order and a Micromark order and have all the things you need to build a kit in 15 minutes. So Bannerman, that's one of the beautiful things about scratch building is there's no shortage of extra parts in the sense that if you mess something up, you just take it off and do it again for the most part. I mean, plastic kits, that's never usually a problem. I mean, the instructions are detailed enough that you're not going to make a mistake in the sense that, messing a part up means different things to different people. Gary might consider messing a part up to finish the side of a building and have the finish look wrong. And then in his mind, that needs to be completely redone. Whereas, messing apart might be putting a plastic kit piece in the wrong place. And once you glue it down, it's pretty much glued down. And so, that gets back to your level of concern for the finished product. I mean, I've had wooden kits. My God, I've got a sawmill that I started and I probably put 30 or 40 hours in that I will never finish because I was so unhappy with the look of the build. I couldn't go back and start over, number one, and I wasn't going to put the time in to finish because I knew it wasn't going to be where I wanted it to be when it was done. I mean, that's, and there's a financial component to this. That I think we're trying to navigate those waters carefully in the sense that, the links that I put up on the screen there, guys, that'll help you. You can for 30 or 40 bucks at tops, you can have everything you need plus the kit, a small kit to get your first model built. And Gary, you were talking last week about that whole, some of the most amazing modelers in the world are people, they don't actually build anything but just real life. They'll build the scene of a rusted out Volkswagen bus sitting in a scrapyard, and you'll look and it'll be detailed down to a bed of flowers, and it photographs and they photograph it as if it really existed. Those people are. Go ahead.
I think plastic modeling sort of gets somebody started in the hobby, and then you sort of progress on from that. And I think scratch building at the end, or I won't say it's the end, because I enjoy putting a kit together. Although sometimes, because I've scratch built now for quite some time, it can be frustrating. Like I know with this kit, the FFG, the Oliver Hazard Perry, I literally built two of those, not kits, the real ships, and served on both of them. One in Seattle and one in Melbourne in Australia. So I know the ship inside out, and I'll be modelling. I'll probably build two of them, one at HMAS Darwin and one at HMAS Melbourne, and I'll try and make them specific to it. But it'll frustrate me because I know that the company, although Academy seems to be pretty good, they're a Korean company.
They are. Academy is, they do really, really good work.
Yeah, they'll be close, but I have to spend. What's crazy? This here in Korea, I can buy for about $16, and but to buy the level of detail that I want to put on it is about another $180. And they're all brass, etched brass detail. Because at a it's 1 in 350th scale, things like the radars and the ladders going up the mast or in plastic are way too thick, so it's all got to be done in brass. And I know that the detail kit that's available for it comes. Well, I think it's done in China, but it's all etched brass, and it goes to the level of detail where you completely shave off all of the plastic detail on the deck and put down the etched brass detail as sheets, and it has the eye bolts, it has everything. So even at 1/350th scale, it'll be an exact like museum quality replica.
Right.
Which is what I want to do, and I'll probably keep one on the boat, or I don't know, or well, Wendy's in the corner going, no. There's only so much that we can sort of store on the boat. It is a big boat, but yeah, the front cabin will have to have a thinning before we head off to Alaska. Because we've been stuck here now for 12 months, modelling is probably the only thing that keeps me sane, and knitting is what Wendy's doing. She's like a grandmother in the corner. If only we could send some stuff home, but the restrictions are such that in Australia, there's virtually no flights from Korea going into Australia. And what I didn't realise is how reliant the post was on commercial airlines, bringing mail and parcels in.
Are you getting mail now?
No, I think we can get mail. I think it depends. Australia is terrible. The US is better. We can, I think Amazon and those sort of places are delivering. So DHL and UPS and that sort of stuff are doing, because they're flying their own flights, they really aren't affected. But what we've found in Australia, the problem we have, the Australian government has closed the country down so harshly that our postal service, when it comes to overseas, to lesser known countries, if it was China, if it was Europe or the US, it really wouldn't be a problem. But because we're here in South Korea, they're fairly restricted. We're not.
Take a month.
Sorry?
A letter is between 2 and 4 weeks.
Yeah, so Wendy's saying a letter you can post, but that's somewhere around 2 to 4 weeks at best to get back to Australia. But yeah, it is what it is. We've just got to put up with it. I'm just hoping that we're slowly coming to the realisation. I think this year is again going to be out of the question because of sorry to go off the topic of modelling, but we're sort of held at ransom between US politics dominating what world politics or what world reaction is.
What exactly is keeping you there, Gary?
Sorry?
What exactly is keeping you there?
We can't leave.
I mean,
there's nowhere to go. There's not one country with a port open anywhere south, north, east, or west of us.
Wow.
So we really literally are stuck until we're sort of hoping we could, although I think the US now has restrictions as well. We could possibly go. We've told you we are sailing from here. The intention is to leave here across to Fukuoka up the west coast of Japan to Kushiro, and then from there across to Dutch Harbor in Alaska. But now the problem is if we get to Alaska, Canada's closed, so we can't sail down the Canadian coast to the US or to the mainland US from Alaska. So the problem for us to sail safely, we need to be able to leave Kashiro by latest, like the last weeks of June, to get across to Dutch Harbor in Alaska. So we need Japan to open. Japan's sort of following the US's lead, although they've got a handle on realistic reporting. I've noticed that we watch the daily statistics on COVID, and it's coming down dramatically. Here in Korea, they've had it under control day one because they're not hysterically reporting false positives.
Right.
So I think Korea is at, like they're saying, there's maybe 600 deaths attributed to COVID in the country, which is probably realistic. And all of those deaths are like 80, 90-year-olds. So they're being realistic about it. Japan, I think, had a bit of an overreaction, but they're slowly coming back to it. So, yeah, as Wendy's in the background, if Japan really wants to put the Olympics on, they're going to have to open up shortly. So if that happens, we may be able to get going, and then we can go. I think we can sail down the Canadian coast, but we can't stop, as in go ashore. We can probably stop and anchor overnight until we get down to Seattle. And then after that, it depends on what happens now with US politics and with what's going on.
How often do you need a port?
We can go for a month and a half, 2 months.
Okay.
But it's all about weather timing for us.
Right.
What Wendy and I do, most people who sail around the world sail like about 20 degrees either side of the equator, and it's very predictable trade winds, and it's quite easy to do. We chose not to do that. We've done that. We chose not to, so we're now sailing in high latitudes. And with high latitude sailing, you've got to be really mindful of what can happen. If anyone follows a program called Windy 2Y, which is it maps, we use it as a weather mapping program. You look at up and around Alaska now, there are winds of 60, 70 knots and 10, 15, 20 metre seas. So you don't want to be in a small craft in those areas. So it's quite a specific time that we can cross.
Right.
So that's what we have to sort of deal with.
Well, hopefully the mail system opens up, because when it does, I can send you some gear packages as well.
Yeah. We're hoping that we can send some stuff home. We're starting to fill the boat up with. Well, yeah. Wendy, I could swing the camera around. No. She's sitting in the corner. She's knitting a blanket.
I was going to say, she's going to have like a her own little blanket company by the time you guys get the trail again.
Well, between you and I, we can start a modeling company, and she can start her own line of.
Yeah. Yeah, my laser printer should be here in the next 7 days, so I'm excited or my 3D printer, and I'm very excited to get to that next phase of the hobby, because it's funny. I realized that there, a structure like this, I'm pretty sure with the right scanner I could scan this in and 3D print this.
Yeah.
Which would, is kind of cool. So, but
I'm looking forward to the advancement of 3D printing. It's already there. It's just a cost factor. I was talking on the weekend when we went sailing with our dentist friend. I was talking to him. He has, I think I just mentioned this before, but when they do implant teeth, when they construct those now, they do it exactly as what a 3D printer is. It physically prints it. But they're now printing to 30 microns, which is like unbelievably detailed.
Yeah, the printer that I bought has a plus minus of 10 or less microns for error, which is insane. But if you look at when I was pricing them, almost all of them the target audience is dentist, because apparently that's what they build all of those molds from. But you're looking, I probably spent right around $4,000 for my printer, which on the grant, I didn't realize that the expenditure now in 3D printing is the scanning. Those scanners go from $800 to $30,000-$40,000, depending on what it is you're after. But
I know.
Go ahead.
When it comes to 3D scanning, it was popular here, or was it Japan? I think when we were in Japan last year or the year before, it was becoming popular in some of the bigger shopping. Oh no, sorry, it was. It was in Busan in Korea, in one of the big Shinsegae shopping malls. They had a company where you could go in and they would 3D scan you and then print that in porcelain. It was a porcelain 3D printer, and they were printing figurines. It wasn't that expensive, but just to get the accurate print, you had to stand in a booth that had something like 400 digital SLR cameras to take shots from everywhere. But technology has jumped ahead, all the time. Yeah. And but I see that part of the hobby. I think we might have talked about this last week. It's going to be a huge bonus, because things that are just too fine to detail, you'll be able to print them. To me, I wouldn't want to print a whole building and just stick it on a layer, because there's virtually, you're taking away a lot of the skill.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that you'd be able to take one of your buildings now, like a shop front, let's say a downtown shop front, you'd be able to do that bottom floor, the windows of the jewelry store that's got all the really, like in a New York, Boston type area, that's got all that really fine detail in the columns and that sort of stuff. You can print all of that and then build the structure around it. And it's the detail that's just going to go insane.
Well, it's going to put Tichy, the Tichy company, probably out of a job, because I no longer. All I need is one Tichy door, and I can have infinite amount of doors. At this point.
That's probably the one thing I'd love to have, a small printer on the boat. This structure that I've been working on. The last thing that I've got to now do is build the doors and the windows.
Yeah.
Which it all becomes difficult, because if I had one of the Tichy windows, I'd cut it and get something close. But I'm going to have to, construct window panes that have got, by scale, the actual panels that hold the window pane in are less than 0.5 millimeter thick. So you start getting to a point where your fingers are just too big to work at that scale.
One of the things I'm very curious about exploring is I've seen some of the really good model railroaders who are now using Photoshop and laser printers to build building facades and mounting them on cardboard or cardstock, and then putting the 3D windows and doors on those buildings.
Yeah.
And using them as backdrop. And they look literally like full 3D buildings on the backdrops.
Yeah.
And that is
Jason Jensen had a video. For those who don't know, Jason, I think he's an East Coast modeler in America. And he's fairly prolific on YouTube. But he did a model recently where the back of the building was probably not going to be seen by anyone unless they're really leaning over and looking for it. So he just printed it on a decent quality laser printer, and it was the back of a fairly large building that, had he have modelled it fully, it was all the brickwork, the windows, the frames, the whole lot. He just printed it and put it on a flat board on the back of the building. So, but virtually he built 3 sides, and the back that's probably never going to be seen. If someone does put their head around there, they'll see the model, and they'd probably never picked it. It was just a digital printer that printed it. And yeah, it's an easy way to go, I suppose.
Yeah.
Technology is just taken over. The whole thing about 3D printing, I think we may have touched on this last week. Some people think in the hobby that it's going to destroy the hobby, but I just don't see that. It's just going to make it a lot more enjoyable, because there's nothing that I really can't say that there's a lot of satisfaction building a 1/87th window pane that's got 8 panels in it. It's like, yeah, it becomes tedious. It's like, and no matter, the problem is when we get down to, and this is where, for those who are listening who aren't modelers, the modeler's dilemma is, where do you stop with detail? You have to start making things bigger than they should be, otherwise they physically just can't be built. And that's where the 3D printing is just going to take over. Things like the panels for a window frame will become realistically thin. But to try and cut that in plastic or wood, the trouble is the knife is thicker than the thing you're trying to cut.
Yeah.
And that's when because for those people who don't understand HO modelling is 3.5 millimeters is 1 foot. So you divide that down, 1 inch is fractions of a millimeter. So when you're talking about a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch window frame holding a panel in, it becomes a hair, and it's so hard to try and do that at scale.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I'm not complaining. Oh, when he says I am, I'm not. But I enjoy the fact that, like, just through us talking, you and I was able to develop this whole new thing of transferring the print from an inkjet, or actually the laser print, from a laser printer, and transferring that. And I'm hopefully I'll get it sorted. But using this, you asked about it, the gesso, which is an artist acrylic medium that painters use on canvas to seal the canvas. But it's a white color, quite a good white color. You can also use it.
I think it's this, right?
I'm sorry. Is that gesso?
It's gold. No, it's matte medium. It's
matte medium. Matte medium slightly different. This is a matte medium, which is same company where I bought it. It's white, looks like PVA, but it dries clear. Whereas the gesso dries white, and it's got a little bit of texture in it. But what I found using your method, I was able to put the gesso onto the paper and then transfer that to the wood. And instead of how you had to paint your white square,
right,
it meant that I could get a really accurate reproduction. So I've just got to try and develop that more. But yeah, it worked. I was quite surprised. But there's a modeler I think he's Canadian. He's got a YouTube channel. He's doing some stuff now, and he's using gesso. Gesso's got like a very fine texture to it. So he's using that as a concrete texture on a bridge that he's building, and it's coming out quite well. And it's an interesting. I've never used it before. It's an artist. I believe artists who are doing oil and acrylic painting will paint gesso down over the canvas first to seal the canvas. So
is it acrylic gesso?
Yeah, it's an acrylic medium.
Yeah, I just found it. It's at Handy Art on Amazon. acrylic gesso. Okay.
And I think what you can do with it as well is when you want to do some fine detail like stucco type work, you can use the gesso and you can mix a little bit of grout powder, like tile grout powder, into it.
Right.
And it really sets up nice and hard, but with that real fine texture. And obviously you can enhance that texture with a brush. So that'll be the next experiment. I'll probably do a cement type structure after I've done the barn.
Yeah, I like that. That's it's got some interest for me.
Yeah, and I haven't tried this. I bought this at the same time from the same art supply shop here in Korea. Everything's written in, apart from the main title. But it's a matte varnish acrylic medium, and when I look at it, it's exactly like I think it's like matte Mod Podge. You know what Mod Podge is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure this is like an artist version of it. It's what an artist would use to coat a painting to give a matte finish. So,
okay.
I
mean, that's what this is. That's what this is. This stuff is, it's a translucent low gloss finish.
Yeah. So that's the same stuff. Whereas the gesso, I bought the gesso by mistake. I thought it was just like this one. That tub was called a varnish. And I'll bring that across. I thought, that was the matte medium.
Right.
But then I looked at the varnish and thought, oh, that's maybe not it. And I thought gesso was because it's got acrylic medium, I thought it was a clear product as well, but it's not. It's got like a white pigment to it, which is good because it means that when you do the transfer.
Well, that's one of the challenges you saw. One of the challenges of my method was when I transfer these prints. And the thing to remember is when you print those things out on tracing paper, white is not actually a color, and so you can be fooled. And you need to put a color background on the building, like they did in real life, or else you're going to get a very very bland looking color of sign. So you need to put white or black behind it. And being able to have a kind of a pre-laid white surface behind it would be ideal, because then you would be able to limit the amount of space on the wall to the sign itself, which is nice. I'll be right, Gary, give me 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Okay. So I'll quickly look through. I've got to apologise to anyone who is commenting. It's the computer is a little bit further away than my eyes can read, but I hope we can get this sorted, that we can actually answer a few of the questions that people are coming up. I should, if Wendy had let me, I'd zoom the camera or the laptop around to show you a little bit of the boat, but hang on, no, I will. She's gonna get upset. Hang on. What? So Wendy is sitting in the corner, knitting, and my modelling table is also our dining table. So unlike Curt having a whole room, I've sort of got to do it bit by bit. So we have to pack up every night, which creates a little bit of a problem. And then behind me is the galley, which normally I'd have a coffee by now, but I haven't got that. So this is our saloon. And now I'm in trouble.
All right. Back.
I was just showing people around the saloon. And Wendy sitting in the corner knitting on a beanbag, and now I'm in trouble.
Aren't we always?
Yes.
So I thought next week we would. I was going to start a build next week and I'm probably going to end up doing this.
You're not on the screen, Kurt.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it?
Oh, the aircraft. Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to start a build next week. Probably one of the aircraft. It'll be that or a German fighter. Just to start walking through application of some of the stuff we talked about from a methods perspective, or I'll start one of my model railroad kits. Who knows? But I thought it would be, and or slash. If you had interest, I would love for you to do a little clinic on some part of scratch building.
Well, we can probably do a little bit of both.
Yeah. I would like for you to do whatever phase of a build you might be in, something that would be applicable to a beginning modeler, be it aging strip wood or staining strip wood, or your methods for early on, maybe walk through the first steps of a project from the memorial you were doing, the pictures you saw and the conversation we had, to the drawings, and things like that.
Yeah, I actually think, mind you, this is just in my head. I haven't committed to anything, but one of the things I do want to do is build the Hoboken swimming bars, which will go beside this project. And so I've been researching that, and I've got a fair few photos. It's really an interesting. It's my other passion is history, and I knew nothing 3 weeks ago about the swimming bars of New York and those areas, and it is really an interesting subject, and it looks like it'll be quite a nice. I'd probably reduce it in size because the one in Hoboken was quite large, but it's a timber structure that's a floating structure off a wharf where there's a railway line running down the side. So people are swimming in the same water that ships are coming and going and all that stuff, which is interesting. I'll just swing this around. One of these days I'll probably build this. Can you see that painting that is on the wall?
Oh yeah.
That is the original Sabroan, which is the name of our boat. That's the original drawn. That's the underdrawing that we've got of the actual. It's an oil painting that a friend of mine, who he's getting a little bit long in the tooth, but he's one of Australia's best maritime artists, and that's Sabroan loading wool at Circular Quay in Sydney in 1871.
Hey, Gary, what was the Sabroan? Was it a cargo ship?
It was the largest clipper ship ever built. Okay. But not only what this is a bit of history, and the reason we have our boat called Spirit of Sabroan, under Australian law, I can't name our boat Sabroan because there is already one registered. But Sabroan was built it's a composite built clipper ship. So all of the frames were steel, cast iron, and then all of the planking was teak. And it was actually built to be one of the original paddle steamer ocean crossing clippers, but they never put the steam into it. So it ended up becoming the largest clipper ever built. And it ran from London to Australia to Shanghai, then back to Australia, and then back to London. And it was the only first-class passenger-carrying clipper ship of its time. But funnily enough, this is where our history goes with it. It was sold to the New South Wales government before Australia was federated, and it became reform ship Sabroan. So it was actually a reform station that was anchored in the Sydney Harbour. So bad boys were sent to the ship to be given discipline, and then when Australia
reform school,
it was a reform school, and then And then when Australia was federated, it was transferred to then what became the new Royal Australian Navy, and it was the sail training vessel, or for young 15-year-old, 14-year-old boys to join the Royal Australian Navy. Its name was changed from Sabroan to Tingara, HMAS Tingara. And as a boy seaman, when I joined, I was 15 when I joined the Navy, we were known as Tingara sailors. Because we could serve in ships in Vietnam, we had to wear, one of the things that they did to show that we were underage was we wore Tingara, where on an Australian Navy uniform we have Australia on both arms, whereas as a sailor under the age of 17, we had to have Tingara on our right arm, which indicated theoretically that we were still a child.
Oh, okay.
Amnesty International put a stop to it because Australia using kids on warships, but which it was a great grounding for me. I loved every minute of it, and so every other friend that I've got that joined through that same scheme enjoyed it as well. But that's where the Sabroan name comes from, and I was lucky enough that our friend, who's the artist, was able to get this for us. He gave us, it's a lithographic print of the underdrawing of his oil painting of
That's very
Sabroan. Cool. Yeah, and Richard, for anyone who's interested in maritime art, Richard Linton is his name. His art, where we talk about spending a week or 2 weeks building a model, a three-dimensional kit. Richard would literally spend 8 to 10 years doing one painting because everything is so absolutely accurate.
That to me almost rises to the level of mentally insane, like in the sense that, because I know modelers like that, they'll I was talking earlier about the discussion about translating George's philosophy. George learned from a couple different modelers. Listen, if you're going to build something this massive, you don't need to put every rivet in every railroad car. There are places where every detail matters, and there are places where almost no detail matters, and it comes down to the viewer, your viewer's eyesight. And for a painting, that's at a different level, because I can get as closer as far and look as closer as far as I want to. That's another level of, that reminds me of that's crazy. That's
one of the coolest things I like about Richard's paintings is because we know Richard and his wife and his family and some of his friends, we can actually look at the paintings, and we're talking, they're quite large paintings, but realistically, the people in the paintings, and some of them are only sort of an inch tall. But I can look at the faces of the people in an inch tall figure on a historical ship and know that it was his daughter, that he painted into that. It's just unbelievable. Yeah,
that's again, this hobby is as much it's the 45-minute plastic kit or the 10-year painting. All of those things are, to me, all of those things are as much a factor of your hobby as you choose it to be. And I think it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this hour, which by the way, we're over and we'll wrap up here in a minute. But I want people to, so many, it's amazing to me. I think a lot of people stop by and watch because, I'll use this analogy. In baseball, Gary, there are far more boisterous Monday morning quarterback fans than in almost any sport in the country. And it's because literally every fan in the stands played baseball at some level when they were young. Yeah. They didn't all play football or basketball or soccer or hockey, but almost everybody played baseball. I think this is the same thing. Almost all of the people here at some point had a miniature hobby, whether it be dolls, toy soldiers, model railroads, whatever, as kids. And they stop by and see this, and there's always good, happy memories in this, because a lot of this for me, I don't know about you, but for me, this hobby, a lot of everything in this hobby ties back to my father. You know, we didn't build models together, but my father taught me how to do this stuff. So there's joy in that. And I think whether we help somebody pick up a paintbrush and start painting again, or start painting for the first time, or somebody get back into modeling, then they get hardcore serious. That's kind of the goal here for me in this, in doing this, in the sense that getting somebody to realize this is every bit the adult hobby as collecting real cars is. And some would say there's a lot, you know, there's a lot less danger in this than that, and a lot less expense. But
well, sometimes some people could spend more, but
yeah, I'm thinking about spending $6,000 on a miniature ship, for crying out loud. I mean, that's just stupid.
But the thing is, to wrap it up, I suppose the great thing about a craft hobby like this, and I'm not sure if Joy's, it's been a bit hard to follow the thing if Joy's here as well, but a craft hobby can be as expensive or as cheap as you want it. Like this building is, you know, like probably 3 or 4 nights work, and it literally cost less than $2.
Yeah.
You know, there's some
cardboard. That's a perfect analogy. In this hobby, I can spend $550 on a kit, and you can spend $5 on materials, and we can make a product at the end that looks the same.
Yeah.
To me, that's the craftsman in this hobby, is the ability to take raw material, regardless. And again, you can spend from $500 to $500, and your $5 model can look 100 times more realistic and artistic than a $500 model, depending on the level of commitment and talent.
Yeah, and that's where you know, money. When you say $5,000 or $6,000 for a model of a ship, you know that when you're spending that sort of money, you're getting quality. When we started this, we were talking about plastic modeling, and I think sometimes people have got to be careful with plastic models. Some of them can be absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
To a point where, you know, you're struggling with that the tank, and the fact is, you know, it's been overcomplicated to make it a more expensive model, and it didn't need to be.
Right.
And the fitment can be poor, where no matter how good your skills are, you're never going to be able to make that unless you start scratch building it.
Right.
You're never going to make it look great.
There was
so I hope anyone who's listening who takes up the hobby, don't get put off if the first thing you build doesn't turn out exactly as you'd hoped.
I think one of the attractions to the hobby that the industry has failed miserably at is there was a run, I think, over the last 15 years to equate number of pieces with determination of quality.
Yeah,
and one has nothing to do with the other.
No.
Because the kit I'm building that Gary's talking about, this is a 1/16 scale German late war scout tank. It was called a Lynx. It was literally built. I have the Army reference manual that they built the tank from. This is the kit's instructions. And you go through the instructions and you can look at the piece by piece and think, oh, great. And then you look at the quality of the components is absolute dog poop. And there's nothing I can do to fix that unless I want to scratch build some of the minutia, which I'm not going to. It's not worth it. But it's going to be an absolute struggle for me to make this kit look realistic at the end, because I do so much detail painting, and there are details in this kit that I don't want to stand out. And that's unfortunate. But the fact of the matter is, like we continue to say, and we will continue saying, this hobby can be as involved or as light as you want it to be. You can go all in and spend. I mean, I've told, I've been blessed. I've been blessed in my life beyond anybody's imagination. And so the thought of spending $6,000 I'm only talking about spending that kind of money on a tank, because that doesn't mean my kids aren't going to go without dinner. or I'm going to have to worry about my next mortgage payment. I've been lucky like that. I wasn't, I made an enormous amount of money, but I wasn't an idiot when I played, and from the standpoint of, pissing my money away. And so, I get to spend my money on my hobbies, which is a huge thing for me. But the thing about it is I could probably commission Garry for half that. He could build something probably as good, if not better looking than the thing I'm going to end up buying. But that's neither here nor there. So let's, this was fun, Garry. It's always good to catch up with you, man. I see this. It was funny because I see the sun coming through the portals, and I'm smiling at the thought of being out on the water when I can't even imagine how cold it is there right now.
We're not going outside the boat today. Today is not going to get above 0. It's a lovely sunny day. If you can get out of the wind and let the sun sort of warm into you, it's not too bad. But Korea, because it's northwesterly winds, so it's coming straight off that Russian Siberian ice and blowing straight down. I'd hate to think what it's like up in Seoul. Like, Seoul is 300 kilometers, I think, north of us. So they cop the cold first. So we've got the rest of the country to try and warm it up a little bit, but it's just bitterly cold outside.
Well, it's funny because not funny, but when you talk about how cold it is, I always think of the guys that were at the Chosin Reservoir, and they talk about the frozen Chosin and how it was the coldest. They talk about the frozen Chosin like guys talk about the Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge. Like, they'll never ever be able to be that cold again in any place in their lives. And to think about it being that cold and you're on the water, which, my goodness,
The only place that I can relate this here in Korea to is some time that I spent in Chicago at Great Lakes, and the wind blowing off the ice in Chicago, it's pretty similar to what it is here. It is cold. It's cold where you walk outside, and if you're not completely rugged up, it hurt. Yeah, Wendy's just saying it was minus 15 degrees last night. So we're lucky that I've got a pretty good heating. I don't know if you can hear it, actually. Just to finish. Here's a really cool thing. Right down here beside me, on the dining room suite, is one of the outlets for the heating system. It's a diesel heating system, blows hot air through the boat. And what I found last night when I was doing that gesso work, you need to let it sit and dry. I can just stick it straight into the heating element, and in seconds it's dry. It's like, wow, this is cool.
So you got your own portable drying oven.
Yeah.
Hey, Garry, thanks again, man. And Wendy, it's always a pleasure to hear you weaving in the background.
Thank you.
Okay, Kurt, sorry, I missed that.
No, go ahead.
We'll catch you about the same place, same time next week.
Yep. I'll see you throughout the week, obviously. But we had a little over 4,000 people in this week, so that's nice. We're people are in, and we'll talk about what we're going to do next week. But I think next week, we're going to do a little combination of actual building a model and maybe a little class from you on introduction to scratch building.
Yep, that's fine. I'm just happy to talk. And as I said, the great thing for us with this whole HAPS thing is the fact that we've now got English as our first language to be able to talk to people.
Yeah. Yep. All right, guys. You have a good night, Garry. Take care. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Same to you, Kurt.
Bye.
All right, guys.
And
bye.
Get the best of Shonda.
I will. Take care.